Hello, welcome back to Slaggy Book Club, the book club that is everything but a book club. I'm Cameron, and in today's episode, I'm going to be sharing with you my October reading wrap up. I'm going to be chatting about all 6 incredible fiction and non-fiction books that I read in October, and letting you know whether or not I think you should read them. Spoiler alert, the answer is yes. To all of them. Before I jump in to my reading wrap up, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has been watching and listening this last week and a bit. Everyone who came here and let the ads play, everyone who hit subscribe. It has genuinely meant so much to me and had such a tangible impact in helping me pay for Olive's vet bills. Guys, in case you missed me posting about it on my Instagram and TikTok, my gorgeous little baby cat, Olive, did have a bit of a medical emergency last week, which is why there was no episode posted last week. It was quite a horrible, stressful, awful time, but he is going to be okay. It's going to be a long recovery, but he will be all right. And so I just really did want to acknowledge the people who came and watched and listened and played ads and hit subscribe. It means so much to me. Your kindness has not gone unnoticed. All right, guys, the first book that I picked up in October was The New Me by Halle Butler. This follows a bored young woman who is working as a corporate temp. She is utterly disillusioned and convinced that if she can just secure a permanent position, then her life will be wonderful. There will be so many people who hate this book. The story is kind of objectively boring. The protagonist is a bit of a loser. She's certainly not helping herself. She's a little delusional, and I can see how she would drive some readers nuts. It's very much the kind of story that won't work for a lot of people. I think it can be compared vibes-wise, plot-wise to My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which we all know is very divisive. But I don't know, I find stories like this funny. I wasn't obsessed, it's definitely not a 5-star, but I was entertained, and it's short, so it doesn't waste your time with its minimalist plot. I think there is a niche audience for this kind of book, but if you do belong to that group, then The New Me is absolutely worth the read. It is one of the better ones I have read. Halle Butler's dry humor is so fantastic. She has such a distinctive voice as well, so I'm actually really interested to read more from her. The next book I picked up was the new one from Akwaeke Emezi called Little Rot. This was so highly anticipated for me, and I did end up reviewing it for the Shameless Book Club Instagram. It is set in the underbelly of the Nigerian city of New Lagos and follows a web of characters who become embroiled in this dark, dangerous, unsettling weekend that will essentially upend their lives. There are sex parties, murder, lies, deception. This novel is dark, a lot darker than You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty, but it does have the same amount of steaminess. The characters are just as compelling and the plot is just as exciting. The characters are interconnected in a way that is so tense and thrilling. This is a complex story, but it is also incredibly easy to follow, and it will swallow you whole in the best, most immersive way. Akwaeke is such a talented author. I've been saying this for years. They have so much range when it comes to storytelling, and they never fail to write the most captivating stories. Little Rot was so hotly anticipated for me, and I think a lot of people, but I don't feel like I've seen enough people talking about it since it's come out. So highly, highly recommend. I then picked up the Degenerates by Raeden Richardson, another string of interconnected characters. However, the structure of this web is a lot more linear. The timeline itself spans many, many more years than just one weekend. We start with an Indian immigrant who sets up shop in Melbourne and builds a life for himself and incidentally the little girl that he picked up along the way. We follow him for years until our perspective shifts to the girl, now a woman, and then we follow her along with two other connected characters as their lives tumble and spin until they inevitably come together and save each other. This is a really complex, eye-opening read. The characters in this story are outcasts, they're invisible people who exist on the margins of society, people I'm really not used to reading about, and who, after reading this incredible, honestly, novel, I feel such a renewed sense of empathy for. This book surprised me for a number of reasons. One, because I did not expect to like it as much as I did. Honestly, it's about people who I can't relate to, about experiences I can't relate to. And honestly, that is what I typically look for in a book. So I probably would not have purchased this had I not been sent it. Also, the plot itself is really unpredictable. I did not know where it was going. I also didn't know when I would be meeting another new central character. They seem to pop up at the most unexpected of times, and suddenly you are learning their history and becoming entirely invested in them. And you may or may not have to let go of the last person you read about for whatever reasons. And it really just takes you on this completely unexpected journey that inevitably makes you care so much for these people who have really only been able to care for themselves because no one else has. This was really unlike anything I have read before. It was so compelling, so beautifully written, and I've found myself already recommending it multiple times to people in the bookstore. For a debut novelist, Raeden Richardson is absolutely one to watch. Then was my second attempt at reading The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson. Now, as some of you may know, I was quite shocked by the first couple of pages of this book. I think I went into it expecting more kind of structured investigation and less meandering prose. It certainly isn't a super loosely written book, but it was not what I was expecting. And so I did need to put it down, read something else, gather my thoughts, and rejig my expectations. When I came back to it feeling a little bit more aligned with what I was getting into, I found that I really loved it and was holding on so tightly to everything that Maggie had to say. I can see what people mean when they describe this as such an important and pivotal text in queer culture. It certainly feels very ahead of its time, having been published almost 10 years ago. It's very radical. Maggie Nelson does not hold back with her thoughts, her opinions, her experiences. It really feels like Maggie shares her whole truth in this story. It is fascinatingly insightful, educational, and intimate. Now, Perfume and Pain by Anna Dorn. I reviewed this one for the Shameless Book Club as well, and my review went up yesterday. And let me tell you, it was so difficult to put my thoughts into 250 words. I have so much to say about this book, so let's get into it. Perfume and Pain by Anna Dorn follows LA-based lesbian author Astrid Dahl, who, after being slightly cancelled, returns to the sapphic writers group that she founded. Here, she meets an alluring young woman named Ivy and begins flirting. She is also spending time with a Emrata-inspired celebrity named Kat Gold, who is adapting her novel for the screen. And she's trying her hardest to avoid her annoying new neighbor, Penelope. Astrid is also an addict. She's kind of attempting recovery, but she doesn't really have any support system, so she's struggling, to put it mildly. She's kind of problematic. She uses slurs, she has a lot of internalized homophobia, but She's also 35 and from a different time, a different queer scene. But she's also a bit of a narcissist. She's not the greatest friend, and she's very judgmental. She's a very complex character. I was also quite surprised to learn that Astrid Dahl shares a lot of biographical details with her creator, Anna Dorn, and not just their initials or the fact that they are LA-based lesbian authors. They are both writing romantic novels off the back of astrology novels. They both went to law school. Anna Dorn got so far as to become and work as a criminal defense lawyer. There are a lot of things that these two have in common, and Anna Dorn has actually been very open about that fact and has said that all she knows is her own life. And so she kind of can't help but write characters that are heavily inspired by herself. What she's also said, though, is that if the stories were entirely based on her life, then they would be very boring. Perfume and Pain is anything but. It is chaos. And while it took me, honestly, until I finished it and started writing out my thoughts to figure out how I actually felt about this story, I've come to the conclusion that I really did love it. It's conflicting. I was so conflicted the whole time I was reading it because the protagonist is horrible and very cringe, and it's almost got this kind of meta irony where in writing this character, Anna Dorn as an author is this character, and so it's very difficult to figure out how to feel about both the protagonist of the story and the author of the story. I knew for a fact that I was really enjoying and really invested in the romantic plot lines. They were really exciting. There's, maybe spoiler alert, an enemies to lovers kind of plot going on there, as well as the flirtation with Ivy from the writers group. There is a definite love triangle. There are tropes, which we all love talking about. And honestly, I get it. I get the appeal. I was very invested and having a very good time. And while the humor in this book is often cringe, it's also funny. It's funny. This is a very millennial book, and I think it is just self-aware enough that it works, and I really loved it. Finally, guys, I read What a Way to Go by Bella Mackie. This is a murder mystery novel about a very awful rich family and the true crime enthusiast who makes it her mission to solve the family patriarch's murder. Now, you guys know that I don't typically read genre fiction like this, but I was sent this book from HarperCollins, and I have mentioned on the VOD in past episodes that I've been maybe thinking about dipping my toe out of literary fiction. So this opportunity presented itself to me, and honestly, I had a fun time reading this book. I enjoyed it. I thought that the plot with the really awful rich people getting what they deserve was very funny and very entertaining. And I also thought that there was some really interesting, subtle commentary on the kind of murky world of true crime entertainment and the lack of maybe ethics when it comes to amateurs profiting off of these things, such as with these podcasts or whatever. I thought it was really interesting, and I can see why people like a little murder mystery. And that is it. That is my October reading wrap up. Every single book that I read last month is a yes from me. If any of them appealed to you, then just know that I have ticked them with my seal of approval, and I absolutely think that you should read them. If you have read any, or if you do go and read any, let me know. Tell me what you think of them, even if you hated them and completely disagree with me. I love to hear it. I love having chats. Guys, as always, please hit subscribe, hit like, hit the bell, hit the button that makes you follow me. We all know it's important. We all know it means a lot, but it has to be said. Thank you to everybody who has been watching and listening over the past few weeks and over the past couple of months. I'm really enjoying doing this, and it's amazing to me that I have an audience at all. So thank you for sticking around for this episode, and I will see you next week for regular programming. Love ya.